Hello, my name is Reverend Crystal Cox, and this is an overview of the new sites out there we're doing about Marc Randazza. So, I was Marc Randazza's client in, so it was the fall of 2011. Marc Randazza, he claims out there everywhere that he wasn't my attorney. He advised me, he emailed me that he was my attorney. He sent emails to me giving me advice with my attorney, Eugene Volek. He absolutely represented me. He worked with the opposition in my case, Obsidian Finance Group versus Crystal Cox, 2014. It was my Ninth Circuit appeal. He worked to try to shut down my rights. He was acting as my attorney, but he was working with the opposition to try to cut a deal to make the case go away. So he was working on a settlement without my permission after we'd already spoke about what I wanted. And the origins of our meeting and stuff I'm going to talk about in another video. This is an overview of what I'm going to talk about on my new Twitter site, which is Randazza Parody. And I have Randazza Storytime on YouTube and Randazza Parody on Rumble. My email is reverendcrystalcox@gmail.com. So the reason I'm bringing this all back now in June of 2024 is because Marc Randazza will not let up. He is a vile, unconstitutional, hypocritical attorney, and he's just a horrible man. I fired him from my appeal because he was mean to me. He violated my rights. He talked down to me. He basically told me how stupid I was. And then he offered pro se, but then he wanted all these fees. And not pro se, I mean pro bono. And, Eugene Volek was pro bono as well, but he didn't do that to me. If Eugene didn't agree with me, he just didn't agree with me. He didn't call me names or tell me I was stupid. We just had a conversation, right? And so, because of the way Marc treated me, I fired him. And because he was negotiating with the other side against my wishes, I wanted a Ninth Circuit appeal no matter what. I'd already been offered 15 settlement offers and said no. I want to go to the Ninth Circuit. I want the Ninth Circuit to say that the First Amendment does not apply to Crystal Cox. Shield laws, retraction laws do not apply to Crystal Cox. I wanted them to say that, and I did this as an activist litigant for all citizens journalists, all investigative bloggers, all industry whistleblowers, and all online speakers. I wanted the verdict no matter what. I didn't care if they offered me millions. I didn't care to get out of the judgment. I did not want to settle, and I refused settlement after settlement. So I'm going to talk about when I first met Marc. I never met him in person, but online, which was through one of my bloggers. Was blogging on one of my anti-corruption sites that I had from exposing corruption in Montana. Used to call my stuff Montana Moxie. And I'm going to talk about all of the gang stalking attorneys that worked with Marc and their techniques. So, these attorneys, I'm not going to go into depth right now, but so what they would do is they have these different law firms, and they're all buddies, and they create their narrative about their target. And then they take that and they file it in different court cases. And they file it in different media, and they had big media connections, Marc's sister and other people, so they could go on, NPR, Forbes, New York Times, and defame whoever they wanted, whoever their target was. Marc was a porn industry attorney, so he would do it to a lot of the women that were whistleblowers within the porn industry, drive them to suicide, just ruin their lives, sue them, and nobody would believe them because who's going to believe them? Who's going to believe me? They're going to believe Marc and all the attorneys. So they did this gang stalking online, and so they created all these blogs and conjuncted that with court filings and things to make it look legit, and the judges listened to them and not their target. And it happened over and over and over and over. And so we're going to talk about who some of those people are, like the Philly blog. I don't remember some of the names. Greenfield. The attorneys within Marc's Randazza Legal Group, like Ron Green and J. Malcolm DeVoy, that advised me as well. I tried to sue Marc for malpractice. in defamation, and he went bankrupt to avoid my lawsuit and to avoid an arbitration with Liberty Media. He committed bankruptcy fraud. He premeditated his bankruptcy. When he filed for bankruptcy, I think it was like 2015 or something. I'm going to talk about all this. And it's also going to be posted on the site. He listed me as his number one creditor for a $10 million malpractice lawsuit and defamation I had against him. And the court sent me a document and said in 30 days, I had to file a proof of claim or I would not have any claims. And so I thought I had to file a proof of claim. So I filed a proof of claim. And I was studying how to do that. And I wasn't saying Marc said I had a claim. I was just preserving my right for a pending litigation. And then when I was researching it, I found the objection to discharging the debt. So I filed that, and I exposed and explained what Marc did with the various trusts and the vehicles and how he did to get everything ready to then go bankrupt to avoid malpractice claims from his clients. And that made him mad, so he sued me. He sued me within his bankruptcy case. But back up here, when I fired him and moved on with Eugene Volokh, he sued me because I had the domain name MarcRandazza.com. At the time, Marc had letterheads for his business that said he was a domain name expert, but he didn't have that of himself or his family. And I'm going to talk about, at the time, Monica Foster, her name's Alexander Mayers, and Desi Fox and Shelley Lubin and a lot of the big porn industry whistleblowers were exposing the corruption within the porn industry. Now, the porn industry wanted my case to stop, and that's why Marc was trying to stop my case. He didn't care about my rights, didn't care what I wanted. He cared about the wealthy porn companies, because if my case went to the 9th and I lost again, they would lose their First Amendment rights online. So before my case, the biggest one was, Hustler, Flynn versus Hustler or something. So the right to parody porn, they had fought all that, and my case was going to wreck it if I lost. And so they wanted to stop me from going. And so did the big media tried to stop me. NPR, Democracy Now!, everybody boycotted me. I was interviewed on all these places for the first 2 weeks, and then everybody silenced, and they painted me out as a crook, and they tried to get me not to appeal. I had death threats, I had lawsuits. Marc worked with, after I fired him, he worked with the opposition, Tort, in the Obsidian finance case, the very case that he was my attorney in, to take my right to appeal as an asset to satisfy the $2.5 million debt judgment that they got against me because the judge said I was not a journalist and I was just a blogger and I didn't have First Amendment rights. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Forbes and Kashmir Hill and her connection to Marc, and I tried to sue them. Right? They accused me of crimes of extortion. There was never any extortion. There was never any criminal charges. My own attorney sold the lie to the world that I was guilty of extortion. Now, if you've seen the site corruptrandazza.com, which is not mine, you know that he was the one committing crimes, right? But he was upset that I had the domain name MarcRandazza.com, and when I told him I had it, so I'd fired him, and I told him the reason why, and I posted that email already on that Randazza parody site. I posted the emails where he absolutely represented me. And so when I fired him, he messaged me back and said, people like you are needed, and I wasn't negotiating, and I wasn't this, and and then he advised me one last time that I should do this and stuff with Eugene Volokh, this and this, and he was very friendly. And so then I thought he was cool with being fired. It was a landmark case. He didn't want to be fired, but I thought that I could trust his words and I could trust, him being forthright. I didn't know anything about him at the time. He initiated contact with me. I didn't initiate contact with him. But he didn't initiate contact with my case. One of my bloggers did. So, and I'm going to post all of that. And I'm bringing it back now because he has a $452,000 default judgment against me. And so that allows him to go after every aspect of my life all the time. And here we are in June of 2024. Anyway, back to 2012. And so I messaged him because he knew I got domain names. I had kevinpatrick.com. I had all the domain names of everybody involved because that's how I did SEO. And that's how I did reporting and exposing corruption. He knew that. And so when I messaged him and I said, oh, well, I had got MarcRandazza.com when you were going to be my attorney to promote my case and to promote what we were doing to promote free speech. And I said, he acted like that he just was really liked and admired what I did online. And so I said, I'm going to be going through this case and stuff for a while, and I could use some work. And so if you know anybody that wants, internet marketing, and I told him some of the different things I did in real estate, the different things, then let me know. Well, he emailed me back, and he was with mafia-type language, just angry and just horrible and threatening me. I better give him that domain name or else you don't want to make an enemy of me. And I read the energy of it, and I was like, there's a lot here. There's a story here. He is clearly really evil. And so I started posting on it the way he was talking to me and the way he treated me, and my experience with Randazza Legal Group, my experience with him telling First Amendment attorneys that he represented me, and then lying later and saying he didn't. Everybody said, Marc didn't do that, and there's no such thing as First Amendment bar, because people were telling me it's the First Amendment bar. I don't know. I just know that he was telling First Amendment attorneys that he represented me, and he was negotiating for me on my behalf without my permission, and he said he wasn't. But it was Eugene Volokh, UCLA law professor, who's my attorney, who told me that Marc Randazza told him and other First Amendment attorneys at some function that he represented Crystal Cox. So I didn't make any of it up. So we're going to talk about all that. And some of the attorneys involved Greenfield, was a Turley. There's that Tracy Conan and what she did. Popat, Kenneth White, J. Malcolm DeVoy, Ron Green. Just oh my gosh, the things they did and the threats to a church that I was affiliated with at the time, and he lied about. Okay, so after the 2012, the domain name thing, so then he sued me, okay, for millions and millions of dollars. And he sued Elliot Bernstein. And when he sued me, and I'm going to go into depth of this, but when he sued me, he went into GoDaddy, which is corrupt. When you sue somebody over a domain name, what happens is they freeze it in your account with the servers where it is, pending a court case. But Marc Randazza is special, and he bullies people and he sues people and he has insiders at GoDaddy and PayPal and everywhere. So GoDaddy, Marc filed a TRO, so an unconstitutional prior restraint protective order, in his case against me to have 40 domain names seized. Half of them belong to me, half of them belong to Elliot Bernstein. Our private property, right? He's since taken all 40 of them to satisfy like $1 on a $452,000 debt. So he took Elliot's assets too. Elliot never even entered the case. Elliot Bernstein of I View It. I'm going to be talking about the I View It case again too, so check out at I View It Theft on Twitter. So just sued me for millions. I got, he was denied a summary judgment, which proved he never had any rights. He never had any trademark. He never had any right. He would defend, like Glenn Beck one that was horrific. He defended people's rights to have domain names with other people's name in it. And he's since taken my domain name, crystalcox.com. But at the time, he's just, you don't have no right to have that name. You shouldn't have that name. And I'm like, oh. And his letterhead's still saying he's a domain name expert. So I got domain names of his family members. And just to make fun of him, I never had a blog about his 3-year-old. He lied about that. The pictures out there of the 3-year-old were his. I didn't have them. They weren't mine. I mean, how would I get them? And he lied to the courts at that time when he sued me that I had JenniferRandazza.com, which I didn't. Someone else had that, and I have all the emails on that. But when he lied to the court and called it fact, the courts believed him over and over. And then his gang stalking attorney friends would report on it, and then they would make it look all legit, and then I'm the outlier, and I'm the extortionist, and I'm the bad guy. And so they clearly defamed me, had a good case against him, which is why he filed bankruptcy. And so when I exposed him in the bankruptcy, he sued me in that. I was out of the country at the time. He didn't serve me. And I answered as soon as I could. I did answer. and it's right there on the docket. He convinced the judge I didn't answer, and there it is, right? I did. And so he got a $452,000 judgment against me. And then later, after suing me for, at that time, about 11 years, the judge, his bankruptcy, he froze the case, the original case, and he froze the malpractice claims. He tried to get him to the bankruptcy court, and the judge denied it. Then he did get him to the bankruptcy courts, finally, and then didn't tell me, and so my malpractice claims got lost. But fast forward to, 2021, so it was about a year and a half ago or so, and the judge put on the docket of the case that, look, you've had Elliot Bernstein and Crystal Cox's domain names for over a decade. Your bankruptcy's well done now. You have to deal with this, right? So he either has to continue with the litigation to keep the names that he'd already seized and ruined the value of, right? So he seized them. So a domain name is internet real estate, okay? So you have like markrandazza.com. I got it to the top of the search engines. I had the top 10 search with my domain names. He wiped that out. So when he had the domain name and changed the servers and through a protective order, redirected them all to a page on his personal lawyer blog that defamed me and showed Forbes and New York Times and all the defaming articles that he was part of creating. And so he essentially, so you can have real estate and that's one value, but if you build a commercial building on it, it's another value. I had built the commercial building on it. And I had it in the search engines. I had content. I had where you could do ad revenue. And he destroyed the value of the names, kept them for, well over a decade. And so they had no value. So then, in about 2021, the judge is like, we got to deal with this. So he's like, oh, well, let's see, what am I going to do? So he decided to follow through with his judgment, which he had filed here in Port Townsend, Jefferson County, Washington, against me, and seize my domain names as an asset. And then he also just seized Elliot's too. Elliot never entered it. They're his property. He's just like, hey, I get everything. Everything's mine. I'm Marc Randazza. And so at the time, so he took crystalcox.com and some other names that I had, and as well, and the ones that he already had. So he just stole them. And so now, then they were worth what, like $1, right? They had been valuable. He devalued them, then took them for the value that he'd stated over a decade. So then after he did all that, he dismissed the case. Okay, so we were in it for about 12 years. He dismissed it recently, within the last year and a half or so. So now we're in June 2024. And for the last 4 months, because I'm involved with people exposing Port Townsend corruption, some of the Port Townsend people that I have been reporting on got online and got a hold of Marc. And so they're feeding him misinformation and whatever they're telling him, but he's filing lawsuits, court cases against me, like 5 of them in the last 3 months locally, just to mess with me, right? And try to continue stressing me out. He rendered me homeless, right? What they did worked. Of course it did, right? Every big media in the world, all the attorneys, all the judges, of course it worked. I lived in a car for 6 years. I lost everything. My family, everything that they believed, why would this attorney lie? Why would the New York Times lie? Why would Forbes lie? Well, they did. And so now that I'm bringing the story back because Marc won't let up. Okay? And so I'm going to tell the story. Now, he can get a default judgment against you any day of the week. So say, I won the lottery, okay? And I'm like, okay, Marc, here's this $452,000. Oh, here you go. Even though he had a corrupt default judgment against me, right? I did answer. I begged the judge to set it aside. I explained the circumstances. Marc's corrupt. The judges believe him. The judges are corrupt. The judges work with him. And the porn attorney and all the blackmail in there. And, Marc, some people emailed me tips in the beginning that he was a Democratic operative, and then something to do with Marky Marc and some house that blew up and Marc being in jail and all this stuff. We're going to revisit it all because he won't let me be. I hadn't been reporting on him. I hadn't been talking about any of this. I just wanted to move on with my life. But he won't let up 12 years later. So I'm going to bring it all back and talk about it. So if Marc doesn't like you, and he sues you, right? Because he knows the courts use abusive power, abusive process, and he knows the court system and you don't, and you can't afford an attorney. So he sues you and you answer it, and then he tells the judge, she didn't answer, and the judge is like, she didn't answer, and gives a default. Now, even if I had $500,000, like say I won the lottery and I paid him, he can file a new default judgment tomorrow, right? And because he can sue me again and say it again. So he can do it over and over and over. So there's really no way to get away from him, right? All because he was so butthurt because I had a domain name he didn't approve of, which I had the right to have. I had already won WIPO cases. We're going to talk about that a lot too. With Prosecutor Rose, because over the iViewIt stuff, I got the names of their top lawyers as .coms. And WIPO said that I had a right to have them, and that Prosecutor Rose didn't. It was 3-panel. It was neutral. But in Marc's case, he took it to WIPO, intellectual property, in arbitration to take the name, and won because there was only one panelist. And I forget, I sued him too. Michelson, something out of New Jersey, and we'll talk about that too, ruled in Marc's favor. So it wasn't, legit at all. And I had already won Prosecutor Rose cases, and, because I'd had the .com of people. I'd been doing it for many, many years because that's what I was doing to get to the top of the search engines for their name. And small town cops and lawyers and judges back then, and I guess even now, when I started, like in 2006, they weren't used to that. So it was information that was already out there. Like say this, they used to say it like there's this giant pile of paper, and paper is just huge, and I pull a paper out and I make it visible. So it was already stuff that was out there. I just made it easily found in the search engines for the parties that were involved. And that's how I did my victims advocacy. That's how I still do it to this day. And Marc knew that. So to relentlessly sue me for 12 years because he was upset at me having a domain name he didn't approve of, and he was upset that I'd fired him because my case is a landmark case. It was the first of its kind, and I really did something important, and I gave my life that I knew for it. And now I live in the Port Townsend area. I'm no longer in a car. He took everything that I had, and he sent people stalked me in person. They followed me to the cafes I went to in town. They threatened me online. They texted me death threats for over a decade. And now we're at the 12-year mark, and Marc Randazza is serving me and sending me certified letters, weekly now, just to mess with me, whatever it is, wherever he thinks that a bank, if he hears of somebody that knows me, he's getting information from the people I'm reporting on in Port Townsend corruption. He's getting information, and so he's just coming at me and at me and at me. So I've decided, even if I had $500,000 laying around, I wouldn't be able to get away from what he's done and what he could continue to do. So I'm just going to fight back in the only way I know how, which is to just report on it all and archive it all. Those of you who watch my stuff, you know that I finally got out of living in a car with some help, through the COVID stuff and chronic homelessness and indigency, and I really appreciate that. I'm not going to go into that. I just kind of makes me sad what my own attorney did to me. I was had interviews every hour. I was in every paper in the world. I was a First Amendment hero. I didn't do it to be a hero, but I didn't do it to be a villain. And the way they painted me out as the monster when I was trying to help people, it was stunning. And it I don't want to say it ruined my life because I trust the Great Spirit, and living in the car was difficult at first, but I also got really close with the land and the air and the water and the heron, I had an experience I wouldn't have had otherwise, and I'm grateful for that. However, but I lost my friends. I lost my home in Montana. I lost, 16-year relationship. I lost everything I knew to be my life because I was not going to let go until I got that Ninth Circuit verdict. And when I got the verdict, they still painted me out as a criminal. And I even had my attorney. Anyway, I digress. This video is about the overview. So, so Philly Law Blog. All the people that were involved in Marc Randazza's gang stalking, that guy Shawn Thompson, I don't know, somebody named Whiteacre, all these people that came at me at the time to defame me and paint me out as an extortionist. The New York Times, I sued the New York Times, and they threw it out. That Judge Preska threw it out. And so we're going to talk about all this. So check out Randazza Parody on X, and all of his other court cases, and all of the bar complaints against him, and all of his suspensions, and all of his bribes and crimes, and supports pedophilia, supports Nazis, supports rapists, supports everyone everywhere, but not me. Because he didn't like that I was speaking critical of him and Randazza Legal Group. Anyway, that's kind of an overview. Check out Randazza's Storytime on YouTube. I'm also going to put it on Reverend Crystal Cox Ramble, some of my other stuff, because that's more established. But here we go. And he's going to sue me. He's going to serve me. I think I got served again today, like every week. So I'll let you know how that goes. He has an attorney, Norwood or something, in Seattle. And so, I'll let you know how it's going. So that's kind of an overview of what we're going to do next. Bye for now.